The room had been loud only seconds earlier, filled with overlapping voices, casual laughter, and the constant hum of phones vibrating against tables and pockets. Then a single sentence cut through the noise, sharp yet understated, carrying a weight that made the air almost heavier. It wasn't shouted or spoken with visible anger, but it landed with precision, piercing through the chatter like a needle. The words seemed harmless at first, casual enough to ignore, yet they carried a silent cruelty that everyone subconsciously recognized. Some people froze instantly, unsure how to react, while others looked away, pretending the moment didn't exist. A few smiled awkwardly, forcing themselves to believe nothing had happened, though the unease was palpable in their stiff movements. For the person it was directed at, the impact was immediate and visceral, almost physical, as if a heavy hand had pressed against their chest. Their heartbeats sped up, chest tightening with recognition, not shock, because this had happened before, in different rooms, under different lights, with different faces. The familiarity of the scenario was worse than surprise. It carried years of conditioned awareness and silent endurance. They knew the pattern by heart: silence from the crowd, validation for the offender, and the quiet continuation of life, as if nothing had occurred. Racism depended on predictability, feeding on expected reactions, exploiting fear, and normalizing avoidance. It thrived on control through assumed outcomes, where both aggression and passivity served its purpose. For a brief moment, it seemed the story would unfold as usual. The target would remain silent, the offender would feel validated, and the crowd would quickly move on to conversations that seemed urgent but were meaningless. Fear would ensure order, and silence would act as an unspoken ally to prejudice. Any hint of anger could later be mocked, transforming courage into spectacle, while quiet endurance could be ignored entirely, serving as tacit permission. That was the script racism relied on, repeated across decades in countless rooms. Yet this time, the expected reaction didn't arrive, and the air itself seemed to shift. The person who had been targeted did not rush to respond, nor did they retreat or shrink from view. They stood quietly, composed, letting the weight of the words hang in the space, letting the discomfort fill the corners of the room. That stillness unsettled others, creating a tension no one could easily dismiss. The silence became an active force, a pause that forced reflection, unplanned yet unavoidable. The room felt charged, every movement seeming louder, every glance heavier, as the joke lost its levity and the comment its casual charm. Suddenly, everyone felt implicated, as if the moment demanded acknowledgement. The joke no longer seemed funny, the comment no longer light. The atmosphere shifted, forcing people to confront their own assumptions and complicity. Those who had smiled nervously now felt exposed in their avoidance. A subtle unease rippled across the room, unspoken but undeniable, a shared understanding of discomfort. Silence, used intentionally, had a power the offender hadn't anticipated, creating a mirror that reflected everyone's behavior back at them. Racism had entered, expecting compliance or chaos, but the moment defied both. What followed wasn't explosive or dramatic in the traditional sense. There were no raised voices, no gestures meant to intimidate, no immediate retaliation. Instead, clarity emerged, delivered with deliberate calm and quiet authority. Words were chosen carefully, with the intent to illuminate rather than provoke, each sentence carrying weight through measured delivery. The offender was forced to hear themselves, while bystanders were forced to examine their silence. In this quiet, dignity became a weapon, disarming hatred in a way that noise and anger never could. This story isn't merely about a single act of prejudice. It is about the pivotal moments when small choices can shift the balance of power in a room. It is about how strength often manifests as control, patience, and clarity rather than volume or aggression. These moments rarely make headlines, but their impact lasts far longer than any viral incident. The subtlety of courage can quietly dismantle assumptions and expectations, changing not just one interaction, but the environment itself. It is in these moments that the unprepared mind of prejudice meets a truth it cannot manipulate. The day began as unremarkably as any other, with routine guiding every action, every movement, and every word. People moved mechanically through familiar spaces, their expressions habitual, their energies subdued. No one anticipated disruption, no one expected confrontation, and no one imagined the ordinary could become extraordinary. The atmosphere was a lull of normalcy, with each person focused on small, practical concerns. Yet within this predictability, a transformative moment was quietly approaching. It arrived disguised as casual conversation, harmless in appearance, but potent in effect. Among the crowd, the person who would become the focus blended seamlessly into the background. They sought no attention, anticipated no confrontation, and carried themselves with the unassuming calm of routine. Their mind was occupied with ordinary matters: where to sit, how long before the next break, what tasks remained unfinished. Life appeared simple, ordinary, and safe. Yet safety is often an illusion for those familiar with prejudice. Awareness existed quietly beneath composure, a protective mechanism built over years of experience. What seemed mundane was actually a delicate preparation for an unexpected test. Around them, interactions flowed easily, laughter rising and falling like a soft tide. Conversations overlapped, voices blending into ambient sound, giving a false sense of anonymity. This assumption of invisibility is precisely what allows moments of prejudice to gain foothold. Micro-expressions, glances held slightly too long, tones shifted just subtly. These were all indicators, invisible to most, but unmistakable to someone accustomed to them. Small cues signaled danger or disrespect, yet outsiders rarely noticed. The environment, seemingly benign, was ripe for disruption. Experience had taught the main character how to navigate such spaces with composure. Attention could be dangerous. Standing out invited scrutiny, or worse. They maintained relaxed posture, neutral expressions, and quiet presence. Survival often manifests as restraint, not confrontation. Years of exposure to microaggressions had honed their awareness into subtle vigilance. Strength, in this context, was patience, observation, and careful calculation. Even subtle signs were present: exchanges of smirks, glances lingering too long, slight tonal changes. These were warnings most ignored or failed to recognize. For those unaccustomed to prejudice, they went unnoticed entirely. Yet for someone who had faced such treatment repeatedly, these were familiar signals. Anticipation and preparation for confrontation often arrive before the moment itself. Awareness transforms ordinary spaces into arenas of constant mental calculation. Nothing had yet occurred, and that is precisely the moment racism prefers. Hatred often waits silently, cloaked in humor, confidence, or entitlement. It observes quietly, assessing the room for weakness or compliance. Then, at the right moment, it acts, testing boundaries with subtle cruelty. Its patience is strategic, its goal predictably destructive. The initial comment, seemingly harmless, was about to reveal its true power. The comment arrived casually, wrapped in humor, delivered with a grin implying it wasn't serious. Laughter followed, not because the words were funny, but because it was easier than confrontation. People glanced around uncertainly, unsure how to respond. The target felt the weight immediately, like a sudden drop in temperature. Their body reacted before their mind could, tightening instinctively. Every question that followed: was it meant for me? Should I respond? Raced silently. The offender continued, encouraged by the lack of resistance, unaware that each second of silence strengthened the target's awareness, rather than undermining it. The room's stillness, meant to protect, instead highlighted the offense. Silence is rarely neutral. It takes sides whether intended or not. Each unchallenged moment gave the comment more confidence. The target remained composed, memory surfacing from past experiences. Every unspoken lesson reinforced the resolve to act with dignity. The pattern escalated predictably, yet subtly. Remarks became sharper, more pointed, revealing intent instead of ignorance. Observers shifted uneasily, sensing the tension. The target experienced scrutiny, not support, as eyes measured responses. Anger rose internally, but remained contained, guided by years of practice and measured reaction. Restraint was strength, not surrender, a calculated display of control. The offender, interpreting calm as weakness, pressed further, confidence swelling with each unopposed comment. The room seemed smaller, heavier, charged with anticipation. All sensed a breaking point, though few could predict its form. The expected outburst never came. Control, the true power, was quietly asserting itself. The audience, previously passive, became witnesses to a subtle but profound shift. At the breaking point, the target stood deliberately, with calm precision. Conversations halted, eyes turned, and the room collectively held its breath. Racism, expecting anger and chaos, met serenity instead. Silence stretched long enough to unsettle everyone, holding space for reflection. Then words were spoken, softly but clearly, focused on dignity rather than retaliation. Every phrase carried weight, revealing the truth of experience and demanding acknowledgement. Confidence drained from the offender as the moment unfolded. Laughter faded, control slipped, and for the first time, they faced the reality of their actions. Humanity replaced abstraction in every measured sentence. Bystanders leaned in, heads lowered, eyes softened, compelled to confront complicity. Silence shifted from protection to accountability, leaving prejudice isolated and vulnerable. Words delivered calmly dismantled the expected hierarchy of fear and aggression. Support emerged organically from others in the room. Voices joined without spectacle, sincerity replacing performance. Authority figures intervened to restore respect, not suppress emotion. Consequences followed naturally, based on accountability rather than revenge. The offender stood alone, stripped of perceived power. The target reclaimed the space with dignity intact, grounded yet unbowed. Long after the moment ended, people remembered the shift more than the words themselves. The atmosphere had changed irreversibly. Racism entered expecting silence or chaos and left exposed, powerless against calm courage. The room returned to ordinary noise, but the lesson lingered. Control, restraint, and clarity had transformed an encounter meant to diminish into one that uplifted. Courage, quiet but unyielding, had prevailed.